quickly admit everyone.
Hello and welcome everybody. I'll just wait while we have everybody admitting into the room. Perfect. I'm so delighted to be here with you all this evening for our webinar on building a mentoring mindset in pharmacy. This is an area I'm really passionate about and I'm really excited to have this opportunity to speak with you all this evening. We have a fantastic panel of speakers and I'm going to come to them in a minute or two to do our introductions. But I really want to focus just for a minute on our title for today. So building a mentoring mindset in pharmacy. This is something that we're all going to have to do together. So really what I want is we really want to hear from you tonight. We're going to have lots of opportunities for engagement built into our webinar. We're going to have some polls and some questions through menti.com, and we're really looking forward to hearing from you tonight. Your thoughts, your experiences and opinions on mentoring. And we'd really love to see and hear your insights and observations or questions coming through on the chat box too as we go through the evening. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sarah Chambers. I'm a pharmacist working in the IIOP for the past 3 years. My background is in community pharmacy, and I've been really lucky to benefit from informal mentoring throughout my career. And since my move into the IIOP, I've been really able to get more involved in that mentoring space, which I've thoroughly enjoyed. I'm trained as a professional leadership and executive coach, and I'm also an accredited mentoring program manager. I've been able to put this training into practice then in my role as a mentor to medical students in RCSI and as a preceptor to 4th year Appel students. And I've really enjoyed all of that. And just today I've matched with my next student for Appel, so I'm looking forward to starting that as well. So I kind of feel I've been on a little bit of a journey with mentoring. And tonight we're going to hear from our fantastic panel on their experiences and thoughts on mentoring. And we really want to start a conversation with you about the journey of the pharmacy profession with mentoring too. So now to introduce the rest of our panel, Dr.Rachael Clarke, Executive Coach and Capability Consultant with the IIOP. Some of you may have met Rachel before as she delivered the mentorship skills in pharmacy workshops with incredibly positive feedback. So Rachel, we're absolutely delighted to have you on board. So if you could tell us a little bit about who you are and why you're here with us tonight.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Sarah. And hello again to anyone joining who's been on the mentoring skills workshop with me. And hello to anybody I actually haven't met before. I hope by the end of tonight's session we feel a little bit more connected. I'm in a very blustery Westport tonight, and I was trying to think, what are the 3 things you probably need to know about me? Well, the first is that I wear a lot of hats. Sarah's just said I work as a consultant. I'm working with the IIOP here on some of the strategy behind mentoring. And then I also work as an executive coach. So I work with a lot of leaders and organizations, helping them, I suppose, to be at their best and removing barriers to their kind of growth. The other thing you need to know about me, I guess, is that I'm a neuroscientist. So I'm always thinking about how do we create the right environments for our brains to thrive. So I work a lot with the Neuro Leadership Institute, and we work with Fortune 500 companies, helping them perform better. So I want to bring some of that perspective as well. And finally, the last thing is, like Sarah, I've been a mentor. I am a mentor and a mentee currently. And I've also ran mentoring programs. So I spent 12 years with AstraZeneca at a local, regional, and then at a global level. And part of my remit globally was working with very highly skilled regulatory and compliance professionals and helping them really kind of, I suppose, focus on their impact and harnessing their power and their potential. So I'm really excited to share some of that with you tonight. So Sarah, back to you.
Thanks, Rachel. And we also have with us tonight Anne-Marie DeFrein, Deputy Chief Pharmacist in the National Cancer Control Programme. Thank you so much for being with us tonight, Anne-Marie. You might tell us a little bit about who you are, your experience, and why you're interested in mentoring.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, I'd be delighted. So I suppose I always feel like everyone knows me, but maybe not in this space. So I'm Anne-Marie DeFrein. I'm a pharmacist. I'm have the pleasure of being from Kerry. I'm a proud Kerry girl, but I suppose I graduated from Trinity in 1997 and I've been in Dublin pretty much ever since, but I'll never forget my Kerry roots. And I suppose I have a varied beginnings in my pharmacy career. You know, I would have worked in that very famous CH Chemists in Tralee, the largest independently owned shop ever. And I would have also then worked in O'Connell's pharmacy chains in Dublin, you know, and I think after that I decided I'd do my pre-reg in hospital because I felt I had a little experience in community, you know. And I went to Beaumont where I spent 5 years, and I quickly kind of specialised into cancer services there, and I really felt the growth for cancer services, particularly in the compounding unit, you know, which is where I really started to feel at home. So I then took up a role as the manager of the compounding unit in St. Vincent's Hospital, where I stayed for 14 years before I moved into the role where I am now at the National Cancer Control Programme, which was a national role. And I mean, in the NCCP, you would have heard a few weeks ago from my colleague Patricia Heckman, you know, where we do a lot of national guidance around safe cancer services, particularly, you know, you would have seen the national treatment regimens, including oral anti-cancer meds. I'm sorry, I have to get my plug in there, Sarah. You know, but I've been very lucky. I've had met great pharmacists along the way who really supported me, and I've always felt that as a profession, you know, pharmacists, we have great capability to share with each other, to learn from each other, and not just in a training sense, but actually, you know, we all have such a huge wealth of experience, and we're a very selfless profession. We help each other so much that I always felt there was great scope for us to do more of that ourselves, you know. So like I say, I've had the huge benefit of learning from a lot of pharmacists along the way, and I've always brought that forward in my career, you know, throughout my 15 years in Vincent's in the compounding unit. I would have had a lot of people go through there with me, and I would have always tried to help and support them in the bigger things of life, you know, not just necessarily the day-to-day workings. And I suppose then, you know, that brought me to what I was actually interested in was mentoring. So I had the pleasure of doing one of the first courses with Rachel a year and a half ago, 2 years ago now, and that really just reminded me and almost confirmed for me that I had that huge interest in mentoring, and that this was a gap. I felt this was something that we should be really looking into pharmacy, you know, that we just have huge scope there. But yep, that's me, Sarah. So I'm really looking forward to this tonight and to getting everyone's views and comments on this. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Anne-Marie. I love that enthusiasm, and I love that piece of having benefited from it yourself and feeding that forward. I love it. Now, I'm so conscious that we could sit here, the three of us, and talk about mentoring for hours and miss the entire content. And I'm very conscious of everybody's time. So let's get started. Rachel, I'm going to hand over to you.
Yeah, please do. I'm going to put on my facilitation hat for the next few minutes. So you've got a bit of a sense of who we are and I guess why we're here on the panel tonight. But the whole purpose of these talks, these fireside chats, this In Conversation with series is also to bring you into the conversation. Now I can see we're nearly at 145 participants tonight. So how do we actually do that in an effective way? So you may have seen the guidance here around going on to menti.com. So if you have your camera, you can just take a picture of the QR code and that'll bring you straight in to the Menti environment. This is the audience engagement tool that Sarah said we're going to use. Or if you want to go on to www.menti.com and enter in the code you see on screen, 5070602, that's going to really help you participate and be a part of the conversation tonight. And there's lots of reminders, of course, on the screen on how to do that too. So when you get to do that, and again, if you need that code, again, it's on the top of your screen, you don't need to switch between devices. So if you're on your phone and you're in, it'll show you all of the slides. What we want to do, I guess, first of all, is check in and see where you're at. It's a Wednesday evening. You've had a long day at work. Tell me what emoji best represents you right now. You know, are we feeling the love? Are we pretty tired? Is there a little bit of maybe even a bad day, right? Or maybe you realize that mentoring is very powerful and you're thinking about this career progression already. Tell me where you're at right now. I'm going to give it another minute or two to let everybody come in here. So a few tired heads, Sarah, in there tonight. So we'll have to make sure we're keeping a focused pace and making sure it's really, really relevant to you all. So thanks everybody for getting on to Menti. I can see the numbers are rising and we are getting a sense of where everyone's at today. And I see nobody is thinking about the money when it comes to mentoring. So let me see if I can change your perspectives on that. Okay. Let's move on to the next one here. Tell me about what your area of practice is. So are you coming from the community space? Are you coming from industry? Are you coming from the hospital environment? What's your area of practice? And this is going to give us a really good picture, I guess, of who's in the Zoom with us tonight and maybe what that experience that they're bringing. So, okay, no surprises. We have a higher amount coming from community, but we also are getting a good, some nice spread across industry and education too. Okay, so the next question I have, and I know we're getting some responses still coming through, and we'll share these afterwards so you'll be able to see it, is to tell me a little bit about your experience, right? How many years experience have you in this area of practice? So are you someone who's kind of earlier in your career? Maybe you're in that 0 to 5 category, 5 years out. Are you moving into more of a kind of emerging role? You're 5 to 10 years in the profession, or maybe you've been there longer, 15 to 20, 20 plus. Let's see where that spread is. So we can see we have a lot of community pharmacists that are 20 years plus. So you just think of the power and the knowledge that is in that group and the opportunities there are to learn from them. And then we have some newer, earlier year pharmacists as well. And I think as we talk through tonight, we're going to share a lot about, what stage of your career will mentoring really impact you and what the needs are as we move through. Okay, so thanks everybody for sharing that. It's fantastic just to see the spread. It's actually really interesting as we move through. The next question I have for you is, what are you looking to get out of tonight? So are you looking to learn more about mentoring? Are you looking to see where you can get involved? Maybe you want to share your own experiences or discuss a little bit more about how it's going to work in pharmacy. Maybe you're here just to connect. I know you can only pick one, so have a pick and tell me what's driving you to come on the call tonight. We'll just wait for a few more votes to come in, but there's a lovely spread. Okay, so everyone's here really to learn about mentoring, to see where they can get involved, and primarily to discuss how it can work in pharmacy. And that's something we're definitely going to do later. We're really going to bring in, of course, Anne-Marie's perspective and Sarah's perspective, and of course, look for your insight as well on Mentimeter as we move through. And what does that look like? So tonight we're going to cover why mentoring matters, how it actually works, and what a mentoring mindset is. We're going to talk a little bit about what this means for pharmacy. Okay, so the first kind of half of the session tonight is going to be a little bit more bringing everybody up to the same understanding around the kind of nuts and bolts of mentoring and why it matters. And then we're going to switch gears a little bit for the second half and talk about what does it mean for pharmacy. Of course, the profession has its own nuances. It has its own kind of unique things about it. So we'll kind of laser in on that. And then we're going to talk about the ways you can actually get involved. And then at the end of our session tonight, I think we have about 60 minutes earmarked approximately, but we can stay on the end if there are some really burning questions that you want to have answered. So hopefully that meets everybody's needs. If, as we move through, you want to share an insight you're having, please use chat on Zoom. Share what you're thinking. Sarah's going to keep an eye on that. If you're having any technical problems, Audrey's going to look out for that on the IIOP team so that you can contribute to the conversation as these insights are arising without maybe having to wait for us to prompt you, because we definitely want to hear from you. Okay, so let's have a move on to the next part, which is really around why mentoring matters. Okay, so I always say to everybody when I start talking about mentoring that one quote springs to my mind, and that's from Dame Minouche Shafiq. She's the director of the London School of Economics, and she was asked, what is it that we need to think about for the future? And she said, well, in the past, jobs were about kind of muscles. Now they're about brains, and in the future they're going to be about heart. And I just really love that quote, because I think it speaks a lot to the fact that, as the future of work changes, so does this emphasis, where we're going to have to talk a lot more about what makes us human and how we can connect and share and, grow our emotional intelligence and grow our ability to kind of lead through change. And mentoring is this lovely bridge between it all. It's literally taking your experience and what you've learned and then bringing that through and connecting with others, so that you're kind of nearly lighting the path for them to move forward. So it's a very powerful thing. And it also, I guess, a lot of organizations have kind of tapped into this, because mentoring is a very important part of people's development strategy. And the reason it is, I guess, is that we know that people are very successful when they go through mentoring programs. There's been a lot of studies that show you get increased promotions in your work, you're happier with what you do. So there's a lot of evidence there to say that mentoring is really fundamental, I guess, from an organization's or profession's perspective. And I guess then, from a real personal perspective, there's an awful lot, of course, to gain there, which we're going to speak about now in a moment. I want you to tell me about your experiences, though, because mentoring, of course, is a very specific thing to us all. It's a very human experience. Have you been a mentor or a mentee? Maybe you've been both, or maybe you haven't been either. Let's have a look and see what your experience has been. Okay, now a lot of the time, I'm not talking about formal mentoring programs where you've been assigned this role. It may be just that you have had experience in the past in being maybe a mentor or a mentee, both. And for some people, maybe this is their first kind of dalliance with mentoring, and they may not have been that before. So nearly 100 votes in, and we can see that nearly half of the audience tonight have been both a mentor and mentee, with a large majority, of course, having been one or the other. Now, don't worry, for those 15 that haven't, we can tap into some other influences, I guess. And this is a question around, who's your favorite on-screen mentor? So tell me, out of all the mentors you see in front of you, who's your favorite? Were you somebody who thought Sister Mary Clarence was amazing in Sister Act? Did you learn from Dumbledore in Harry Potter? Were you more of a karate kid? I mean, there's so much, I guess, we see of mentoring. And actually, in a lot of the movies, they're predominantly males. Males seem to be a lot of the mentors. So, I was really looking for where we could see some female influences. If you watch Park and Recs, of course, Leslie Knope is one as well. And really, I guess, each of these mentors bring different things, but we can kind of learn a lot from people, I guess, in the media as well around mentoring. So just a little bit of fun there. Tell me a little bit more about when you were a mentor yourself. A mentor that you've actually had, sorry, not when you've been a mentor. What was it about that mentor? What did they do that really helped you? So everyone who's been a mentee in the audience, what was it that the mentor did that really helped you? Just think back and connect to that. So I'm seeing, they gave you insight and allowed you to show what you learned. They listened to you. That's coming up once or twice. And they believed in you and pushed you out of your comfort zone. So we're seeing a lot of encouragement, a lot of belief, frank and rapid feedback. So we're already starting to get a sense of the fact that, mentoring is happening around us. And then the power of it. So a lot of empathy, zoned in on this problem area. So really creating clarity maybe with you around what needed to be done. So this non-judgmental advice, encouraging you to be brave, giving you confidence, clarity. Listening is coming up a lot, right? You can see that from all of the answers you're giving. So approachable and open, and we'll speak a lot about that and how important that is. They've also given you guidance, inspiration, feedback, caring about you, support, listening. So many great answers coming in here around what good looks like when it comes to being a mentor. And I guess if we just transition from that for a moment and we ask the question, how did that actually make you feel? So with having that relationship, how did it make you feel? I love that. Sane, right? Respected, supported, like everything was possible, empowered, safe. So if you just think about that impact that we're having, there's a reason why 72% of Fortune 500 companies have mentoring programs in place, because of the huge benefit it has. And if you think about, you always remember how people made you feel. So I love the possibility here, like everything was possible. I was confident, I was valued as a member of the team. I was supported, respected, valued. I felt confident. I mean, this is exactly the kind of environment we want to create for the profession, for people in the profession. And we can just see how powerful mentoring is. Bulletproof. You know, we've all had those moments where, you know, somebody has shaped us and supported us. You know, and sane is coming up quite a lot. So it really resonated with everyone, which I love to see. Okay. So I think we have a fairly strong understanding, of course, of the why for mentoring. Within the IIOP, we have a definition here, which is pulling together, I guess, from a lot of definitions to really kind of laser in on what it is. And we've touched on this important component of professional development, the fact that it's this supportive and nurturing relationship, and this sense of being a sounding board, right, where you can transition in your learning. The idea, of course, of mentoring is through the sharing of the skills and knowledge and the expertise, we're empowered to really develop to our full potential. And there's a nod, of course, to the fact that there's a lot of nuance in mentoring and that it can cover a wide variety of context. But of course, when it's successful, it really can benefit everyone. Now, there's a lovely analogy I like to use around mentoring, which is one around a bridge. And it's this concept that maybe as a mentor, you're nearly like engineering a bridge and building different bridges depending on the situation, the person that's involved, the conditions that are around. So, you know, on one hand, you may have to build, you know, a very big bridge that's got lots of structure and lots of support. And even in a low risk environment, your mentee may need that bridge to be able to get to where they want to go. But on the other hand, you may be working with a mentee who, you know, if you picture one of these narrow suspension bridges, you know, and maybe there's like some sort of a tropical storm and they're happy to go out there and cross that bridge because that's the support that they need at that time. So part of it, I suppose, the beauty of mentoring, it's understanding that you can guide and support people on that path. And that may be building bridges, it may be encouraging them just to take that next step. But the idea is that bridge or that journey is theirs and that you're there very much to kind of support them on that. So, you know, as we move through the talk tonight, and we can think a little bit about the people that you're working with or you're mentoring, and it's very much around their needs and meeting them where they're at. And that's kind of the key to the success of the relationship. Okay, what is mentoring not? So we talk about this for a lot, but mentoring isn't training, therapy, or managing. It's not coaching. There's a lot of overlap in these areas, but it is something that's distinct from those areas. It's you know, one of the things I think with managing, and sometimes we wear both hats. We manage people.
Oh, Rachel, you're on mute there.
Unmute. Sorry about that. I think it just happened. As a, you know, if you were a manager and you're also mentoring, it's just to be aware, I guess, with management, you often bring that kind of lens and perspective of the organization and maybe their priorities. And I know in the past, if I've been managing people, sometimes it's not possible to allow them to grow in certain ways. You know, it's just not one of the organization's priorities. So you sometimes are shaped by that. And you can be quite authoritative, I guess, when you're a manager, and people may open up to somebody who's outside of that. You know, with the therapy, I guess it's focused a lot in the past, whereas mentoring is very much future focused. And of course, there's a lot of commonality with coaching. I think you bring a lot more of your own experiences to mentoring than you do with coaching. The fact that it's not a one-way street, we'll talk a little bit to that you know, both the mentor and the mentee will kind of contribute equally in various shapes and forms through the relationship. And that mentoring isn't something that actually happens to you, right? We don't just get to lie there and be mentored. It actually requires consciousness and commitment. And the last point, I suppose, is it's not a cure-all. You know, just because you go to mentoring doesn't mean that everything will be solved. The idea, of course, is that it's very unique, and people have to really, I suppose, kind of, their own mentee is really in charge of their own development. And mentoring, of course, is a great way to support that. So let's talk a little bit more about the benefits to mentees. And you spoke to this a moment ago when you shared the kind of perspectives you all had, this sense of having the safe space to talk and to try things out, and the help that you got maybe with problem solving and tackling difficult situations. Access to stretch and challenge is important too. So your mentor is there again to kind of push those boundaries and to help you see your own potential, and to give you access maybe to information you haven't had before. Mentoring is often seen as a way to get to where you want to go faster, and sometimes even just having access to different networks can be key to that. The big benefit, of course, is your own self-awareness, being a lot more in tune with your own strengths. We're very quick, I think, to not think of our own strengths. So having somebody kind of maybe share what they see in us can be a very powerful thing. And finally, the other benefit we have here, of course, is this guidance and perspective, which we know mentoring really brings. So if we look at the mentors, because this is something that comes up, a lot of people will often say, okay, is mentoring, is it something that the benefit is all with the mentee? Well, the reality is that mentors get an awful lot from the relationship. So in the programs I've ran before, people will come to you and say, God, I'm surprised at how much I got out of this. One, I've been able to really kind of think about how I show up, how I distill the information that I have and share it, how I can kind of broaden my own understanding of the profession and how I actually get a chance to influence it. So there's a lot of opportunity there as a mentor. And you'll have seen this yourselves, those of you who've mentored. It's that lovely satisfaction of giving something back, but also improving your own skills while you do it. And this opportunity to reflect, of course, is really important. And sometimes it can get lost in the day-to-day running of our jobs. So it's nice maybe to kind of have some focused time for that. And it's definitely a reason, I think, why people come back to mentoring time and time again. So let's talk a little bit about the here and now, and certainly about kind of in times of crisis, how can mentoring support? There's a really good article in the Harvard Business Review that we're going to put on the IIOP website, so you'll be able to access it. But I wanted to show it because it was kind of saying that, look, when you look at first line workers, we know that mentoring is really important right now. You're navigating so much, you're trying to deliver kind of patient care, but also navigate this uncertainty, this complexity. So, the support is needed. So from an emotional perspective, support is needed. And also this sense of being a stabilizing force and not feeling very much that you're on your own. So there was two kind of guidance here. One was around making sure you're kind of looking after yourself first. So taking stock of your own capacity. Is this a good time for you to be mentoring? And maybe there's other ways that you can provide support if you don't have that capacity to really help somebody else. And then if you are kind of mentoring actively in this moment, just attend to your the emotional well-being of the mentee. Don't be rushing in, I suppose, with technical things before maybe, focusing a little bit holistically on their emotional well-being. And it was kind of saying, think about just the power of actually listening to somebody and just sharing that back. And I'm sure many of you are doing that day to day with your teams. But this focus on strengths and just being there to listen and create that safe space for people, it is really needed. So we'll definitely share this article if you'd like to read more about it, because I think it's obviously just very relevant right now. So let's talk about how it works. So the nuts and bolts of mentoring, a lot of times people will come to training because they have the expertise in their areas and they have the desire to be a mentor, but sometimes they just want a little bit of support around how do we structure it and what does that look like. So one of the things to know is that there are clear roles and responsibilities for mentors and mentees. And part of the work we do when we have a formal mentoring program is making sure that both people are very clear on what that looks like, because that actually prevents a lot of problems down the line when people are very clear on what their responsibility is. So one of the big things around mentees is that their job is really to drive the relationship. It's not about coming to the mentoring conversation and expecting you as a mentor to have all of the ideas and all of the thoughts. The onus is on the mentee to really drive their own development and follow through on the tasks agreed, and share with you where things aren't working for them. So that's a really important distinction around mentees' expectations. They're also empowered to think about what they want to focus the conversation on. Whereas when you look at the mentor role, and I know there's a lot of information on this slide here, but this is really around, the mentor's focus is around building this climate of trust, being objective, really being focused on the needs of the mentee and helping them find their own solutions. And absolutely, there's an element of giving advice there and guidance, but it's always centered around where the mentee is at and what their needs are. And kind of you're really offering that to allow them to either take it on board or decide not to. It's really important, of course, as well that you support your mentees in expanding their networks and realizing the power of networks and being able, as someone said, giving that kind of really clear feedback to the mentee. So we can definitely share these slides, and you can take a look at them as you decide to be more involved in mentoring. But this is again an area that we spend a lot of time up front with people talking through. So when it comes to the skills, I'm just going to leave these on display for a moment. There are kind of 11 skills that are very important in mentoring. And you will be familiar and very well able on many of these skills. I mean, just building rapport, listening, these are all very kind of day-to-day, very important things in being a pharmacist. And I totally get that. So when people come to mentoring and when they want to become better mentors, we actually just look a little bit on each of these skills and help people get stronger with them. So it may come down to your questioning. How powerful is your questioning? The more, I suppose, experienced mentors ask less questions. And sometimes it can take one question that can really shift the conversation. Some of these you may not be familiar with. Future pacing, that's number 10. So this is an area that is around helping your mentee imagine the future and putting kind of a lot of, I suppose, vision and perspective in that to help them nearly put themselves in the state of where they want to be, so that they build that kind of molecular memory, even though I suppose physically it hasn't happened yet. So there's a couple of skills that you can learn. And of course, these skills are very impactful, not just in mentoring, but of course in our day-to-day lives. But this building rapport and trust is just so critical. And often we find that that's where we need to spend a lot of our time at the start, and really kind of getting the relationship up to speed. And the strengths-based approach is a real mantra of the mentoring world, where we really focus on what's strong, what's going well for somebody, and how can they use that and where they want to go next, as opposed to maybe not looking at strengths and focusing on weaknesses. Now, I could talk to you for a full hour about these, but I'm so conscious of time. And what I want to do now, I guess, is just really touch base with you all and ask you right now where you're at. If I had a magic wand and said we could give you wisdom or support, what would you need right now in your career? Can you share with us what your first instincts are? More money. I'd love to do that. Not always the case. But is there a certain area, time for development, even just having time to have a break, direction? What else? Effective networking, how we actually get better pay, how to work from home, of course. So these are all areas that are really topical. Management skills, getting better lunch hours. I've heard that before. More time management, more confidence to stay calm. So, this question in one way is literally, just for you to think a little bit yourself and say, what's the one thing that could make a big difference for you right now? And how can actually, maybe as a profession, and Sarah, something that we need to consider when we're thinking about programs, where can we factor it in? So I won't have time to run through everyone's right now, but you can just see already boundary setting, feedback, frank understanding of strengths and weaknesses, more respect, and the time to support yourself and your team. So there's a lot in this, I know, and thank you so much for sharing it and for providing that insight for us. Now, what I want to do next, this was a very complicated slide that we'd included, which is a bit frightening to look at. But I guess the idea is, when's the right time to get mentoring? And I guess the answer is it can happen at all stages of your career. So, when you look at your role, you're leading yourself, you're leading other people, you're leading, practice, and then you may be leading the profession. So your needs, of course, are going to be different depending on where you are in your career. It may be around building confidence. It may be around leading a new team. So what is it that you actually need? And we've touched on some of those in the last slide. And I guess the idea is, when we're building a mentoring mindset, is saying to ourselves, okay, at what stage do you need certain levels of support, and who's the right mentor to give that? It's often people that maybe are 2 or 3 years ahead of you that can provide you with some guidance and support. It's not always somebody who's at a really senior level that you need. And of course, reverse mentoring is very important as well, this kind of fresh perspective that can come in. So, it's a busy slide, I know, but I think it speaks to, the complexity, I think, that's involved as you transition in your career, and where those areas of need are. And we'll definitely make these slides available. I know I'm moving through them quite fast, but I want you to know that you can see them again. Okay, so what does a relationship look like? And again, this is something around the structure. When we have a mentoring relationship, we really want to think about, the phases that are involved. So it's, there's a lot of distinct areas. The first is around building rapport and getting to know each other. And then the next is around how do you move into setting your goals, and then, kind of progressing that learning. And then what do you do when all that's happened? How do you wind it down in a good way? And how do you celebrate the growth that's happened? And then what do you do to move on? So again, this is something, if we talk about formal mentoring, we give a lot of guidance and support and advice around what to do at each stage, and how to really set yourself up for success. And where you see problems, it can often lead to the fact that you rush into maybe phase 2 and phase 3. We have this bias to action, right? We want to just get involved rather than spending time maybe building trust. I've told a story in the past around how I went to a mentoring conversation, and I needed help in my career. I was kind of transitioning into an area of huge visibility, and when I went to meet with my mentor, we just didn't scratch the surface at all. I didn't feel like I wanted to share anything with this person, and my own kind of imposter syndrome came into play. So, unless you take the time to really build trust and build rapport, you're not going to get into the mentoring nitty-gritty straight away. And I think it's to allow time for that. So what can go wrong? A lot of it can come down to maybe pushing for things too early, not maybe having things to talk about, or not getting beyond the simple issues, because we haven't spent time at the start creating that kind of safe space and being able to actually get to know each other and understand the real drivers behind any challenges that a person is facing. And I think over time you'll see that goals can change. Another thing that can go wrong is thinking that one person can give you all that you need. Many people are having multiple mentors in their career, so that they have that variability, people that play a different role for you. So again, we can talk more about this as we have this conversation about mindsets, but things will go wrong, and usually that's why we kind of need structure, I guess, is to kind of help mitigate some of those. Now, we're kind of at a pause point, I think, a natural pause point, because there's a lot to take in there. So we'll just kind of stop, I think, for a minute, just to give you time to digest and reflect. Stand up if you have to, take a bit of coffee. And if there's something that's coming to your mind right now, maybe make a note of it. Maybe it's an old mentor you want to reconnect with. Maybe it's an area that's you realizing you need a bit of help with. So just make a note of that for yourself. And we're just going to pause for a second to let you do that. Okay, so before we bring Anne-Marie and Sarah back into the conversation, I just wanted to finally touch around mentoring mindset. So, your mindset is really important. And as, we build this mindset around mentoring, it's important to just remember one or two important things around mindset. The first is that your mindset is, kind of the way that you think about things, how you approach things. And it can determine, how you respond to things, how you experience things, and what we actually pay attention to. So, you know, Carol Dweck has done a lot of work, really great work on growth mindsets and fixed mindsets. And you may be familiar with this. And if you're not, we can share some articles on it. But there's a whole school of thought around just taking time to understand what mindset you're in. If you have more of a growth mindset, it means you're a lot more open to seeing challenge as something you can learn from. Whereas people with fixed mindsets are usually focused a little bit more on proving that they have an ability. We're not one or the other. We can be both, and sometimes they can be shaped from, you know, our growing up experience, the society as a whole. Most of us are actually having a fixed mindset as our dominant mindset. Now, the reason I bring it up is because, you know, if we can kind of shift our mindset to one that's more kind of learning orientated, it has a huge impact on the clarity of thinking we have and our creativity. So a mentor can really help notice the mindset you're in and find, you know, ways to help you shift it. So, you know, you might be in a fixed mindset if you're, you know, resistant to feedback, if you're just thinking this is just the way I am. There's a lot of different indicators that you're having a fixed mindset. So ideally, we want to kind of work at moving into a growth mindset, so that we're really in the right place to take on the benefits of mentoring. And I guess the last slide I have before we get into the kind of conversation with Sarah and Anne-Marie is just about when we're talking about building a mindset together. I hope, you know, by now we're kind of building a picture of what that can look like. So it's about having a growth mindset. It's about having visibility at all levels across the profession, and for us to be really intentional about how we show up and having the supports and the skills at play to help us do that. So when you hear us, I suppose, speak in future about a mentoring mindset, this is really how we're starting to connect the pieces together, and definitely want your input as we flesh this out. I'm so conscious it's a lot of information to take in, but we'll have loads of touch points with you over the coming months where we can really kind of explore this in a lot more detail. So what I'm going to do now is kind of switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about what does this actually mean for the profession. And I'd like to kind of, you know, bring Sarah, of course, and Anne-Marie back in. So I guess, Sarah, I'm going to come to you first of all and kind of ask you, I guess, from your perspective, to tell us a little bit about your experiences with mentoring.
Thanks, Rachel. I really enjoyed listening to that again, and you always pick up something different each time. I think one thing that really stuck with me there is that transition piece. So when I think about my career and my experience of having that mentor, or having that person to advise or be that sounding board, it's really in that early career stage. So I think we all remember, well, it was called pre-reg when it was in my time, that fear of going from the pre-reg to your first day as a fully grown pharmacist, and all that uncertainty and I suppose fear is probably the word I'd use around that piece. So I was really lucky to work with a pharmacist in Tala who was about that 2 to 3 years ahead of me. And it was just fantastic to have that sounding board of somebody who had been through those same experiences recently, knew what the learnings were, where their pitfalls had been, and could share that with me. So I think that really sped up my learning curve, and it was a great support for me. So I think it opened doors in terms of different roles and everything work, but it also increased my confidence. And I think it was that piece of working together where we really had built up that rapport to begin with, and it really just supported me through all those various transitions that are really common in that early career stage. So I think that's, for me, I just look back on that and just see how beneficial even an informal mentoring relationship like that can be. And when you think about your career and all the people who have molded or shaped it, I just think that they're those powerful moments when you have those interactions with people in your career. So that's what's really standing out for me as my key moment.
I think it really resonates, right, with what we've seen already. It's those high value conversations at optimal moments, you know, that kind of nearly, you know, make you feel that anything is possible and allow you maybe to have that confidence to continue. So that's been your experience as the mentee, but have you been a mentor as well, Sarah? Have you had experience doing that?
Yeah, so I think probably along the lines of what we've been hearing from everyone on the call today is, I suppose, as in your role in your pharmacy, you are managing people. So there's definitely a lot of training in my role as supervising pharmacist. I would have really enjoyed that training piece and developing staff. So staff who would have come through with OTC, maybe had an interest in the dispensary. One girl now is in 3rd-year pharmacy. She's gone back to be a pharmacist. So she's doing that now. So that sense of satisfaction of having just played any tiny part in that and being able to bring somebody to their full potential is something that I really enjoy. And then I suppose more formally then the Appel experiential learning placements, being a preceptor for a 4th year has just been a really rewarding experience as well. So that's, I suppose, the formal and more informal experience I've had in pharmacy and mentoring.
But I think it's great to see that this isn't something, we're not saying this is something new. This is something, we're doing a lot of this already, I think, within the profession is the sense I'm getting. And there's a lot of kind of, I suppose, informal mentoring happening. And as you say, the formal programs starting to come to the fore. And Sarah, you can really get a sense of that grow that you have for it. I can see that. It's really lovely to see that on your face. And Marie, you mentioned that earlier, that you kind of, you were kind of feeling the love and you kind of went into the hospital environment. How has your experience changed or evolved, I suppose, with mentoring, your experience with mentoring in that hospital space? Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, happily, of course. Like I said, I think I was very lucky early on that I worked with some great people who very quickly, I think, impressed on me that, people have an awful lot to share, and if you can learn an awful lot from working with people. So in the hospital environment, I suppose, in a large teaching hospital like I would have worked in Beaumont and Vincent's, we would have had an awful lot of pre-reg students and also people doing their masters in clinical pharmacy and doing other research, and but so I would have in the aseptic compounding unit, I would have very regularly been a supervisor for that aspect and of their masters, and I suppose for them I would have always tried to not just do the necessary training elements with them, but kind of initially I would have tried to discreetly check how they were getting on, how they were finding it, how they felt they were getting on themselves, what was, and you very quickly learned that the masters makes people think about much more than the elements of pharmacy that they're learning about, the clinical pharmacy parts. And some of my really interesting experiences, actually I've had 2 students over the years who were at a kind of a pivotal point where they were coming towards the end of their masters, and they were in this kind of scenario of and I was very happy that they were, that they were in a position that they could talk to me about this, but that they were, do I stay and do I progress and try and get a senior role in hospital? I'm really interested in the cancer space or in the cardiology space, but actually I'm really enjoying the academic life, and I think I might prefer to do a PhD. And it was great to be able to have those conversations with people. And what I actually found myself afterwards is that by listening to them and talking it through very much with them, it made me challenge my own perceptions, and it made me realize that actually this was a gap that I needed to address too. So I found that actually I was benefiting out of it probably as much as the people I was talking to, so there was huge learning for me as well as for them. And I hope that perhaps I helped them, but I think it was about making that little safe space for them to be able to have the conversation about bigger things, about themselves and where they were right then, not just about the work you do every day. And I think that's what brought me to the realization that mentoring is such an area that can bring benefits in ways you don't even realize.
Well, you know what? There's a couple of things coming up when you say that. I was watching an interview with Simon Sinek. He's one of these thought leaders in development, and he was saying that his mentors, he thanked somebody for being a mentor once, and they went, "Well, thank you for being mine." And he was saying it was the first time he realized that it is this kind of duality. It's the both ways. So I love your example of that. Do you know the other thing I thought of was when you had your master's students and they were coming to you and they were kind of saying, "Look, I'm thinking about a career in the hospital or in the cancer space." And of course, that's an area where you're in right now. Did you have to fight that urge to kind of encourage them down your own road, or how did that proceed?
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I suppose I mean they would have, yes, we would have discussed very much what's in the cancer space. And I mean, there's an awful lot of scope in the cancer space. And yeah, you have to try and not just go, yes, absolutely, we need more in this space, but you have to tell people, well, you know, why that area, what do you think that area can do for you? So, you know, it's hard not to just take what you can get when you can get it, but to listen for the pieces too. And it varies depending on what stage people are at. Even in their masters, you can see the change from someone who's at the beginning, who's just come out of, well, it was their pre-reg, you know, their intern year, they've gone straight into a master's. They're kind of much more impressionable and enthusiastic than someone who's doing a master's a little later on, who tends to have picked up other nuances along their way, you know. But I suppose cancer is something people always have an interest in, but it's quite a specific area to work in. But you could very much see that then they would move on to their next rotation. So it was about making people think about the bigger things, not just the right now, you know, not just the learning aspects, but more the why this, why for you, why have you particularly drawn to this part, I felt.
And you know, I guess when you think about the pharmacy profession as a whole, like where would you see the barriers, right? Because it's such a, you know, it sounds like such a good news story, right? Mentoring is so powerful, it's so important, it's so impactful. Where's the rub, Anne-Marie? Where do you think the barriers are in pharmacy?
I think that there's a few that I would see, and certainly you know, that I would have felt myself when I would have started to look at the mentorship space. When I had that opportunity to do that course, it made me think about it quite a lot. And I think it's a bit of the, well, you know, like, why would I do this? Like, you know, it's kind of this sitting back and waiting for it to be done so that you can involve yourself in it. You know, it's that fear of putting yourself out there, or it's that fear of saying, well, you know, it's like you put the formal structure around it. But if I ask someone, you know, to be my mentor, am I going to give them the fear? And or am I, you know, it's the expectations, and it's exactly those touch points that you mentioned earlier, Rachel. I think it's the challenges that I see are the lack of that formal structure, and in that lack, people are just a little reticent of making that first step. You know, I mean, it's the fear of the unknown, I suppose, really. And I think, again, as pharmacists, we're excellent healthcare professionals. We think of everyone else. We tend to not think of ourselves in that softer skill space, in that looking after ourselves space. And we think, you know, who am I to ask for someone to help me about these sorts of things? It's not as tangible as training is. And that's the way I've always felt about it. But I really think it's a massive gap, you know, and I see in so many other professions, you know, like the banking sector and in the corporate sectors, they have all these structured mentorship things in place to bring through people who show promise, or and you know, everyone has promise. And I just think that's why aren't we tapping into this? Like you said, you know, earlier on, how many of the people in your poll had more than 20 years experience? Oh my God, we must have thousands of years of experience on this call tonight. And think of all the new students coming through each year who could have benefited from the bits that we've learned.
And it's tapping into that, and it's also seeing how we can harness it. And we've got some comments coming in, and absolutely, look, to everybody that's you know, with us tonight, you know, what insights are coming up for you right now? You know, where do you see the opportunities? Where do you see the barriers? Like, please share, because that's going to spark insight in all of us and kind of really help with our thinking, you know. So Anne-Marie, thank you so much for that. I could talk to you all night about this, and I'm going to come back to Sarah, and if we get a chance before the end, I'm going to circle back. But thank you for sharing that with us. And Nicholas put a lovely comment in saying that, let me just go to the chat here. If people could see examples of all the informal mentoring that pharmacists do, it would be easier to get the mentoring structure up and running. Nicola, that's a great point. And that's why I think when I talked about the mindset earlier, I was saying we have to make it visible. You know, we have to show what good looks like and remove some of these barriers. That Simon Sinek had said, you don't just walk up to somebody and say, will you be my mentor? You know, it's like, you wouldn't do that. Will you be my friend? It takes time, you know, to build that.
And so Nicola's an amazing example herself, I can tell you. I'd say probably 70% of the people on this phone have had some engagement with Nicola.
Well, this is it. And also to give this visibility to all of the great work that's being done. Sarah, I'm going to come back to you. Speaking of great work, you've done some digging, haven't you, into what's happening in the profession as a whole and what good looks like. Can we jump onto that for a minute and talk through that?
Let's go. I would love to. Thank you.
Okay, let me go in here and share my screen again. Okay. So what does good look like, Sarah?
So we had seen that there was this appetite for mentoring, and straight away put my pharmacist hat on, and I was like, where is the evidence? What is the best practice? So I went on the hunt. So who is doing this already? What are they doing well? What have they learnt? What would they do differently if they could start again? And where are those parallels that we could draw on, and where could we feed that forward into a programme for pharmacy in Ireland? So we had a look at pharmacy in other parts of the world, from Australia, Canada, the US, and closer to home in the UK. We looked at other healthcare settings. So we looked at Medicine Sans Frontières, the NHS Leadership Academy. We even looked outside of healthcare. So you were talking about bridges earlier. There's a fantastic program for engineers in Denmark. So they had some great little nuggets for us. And there's another excellent program for teachers in Ireland as well. So what we really focused in on was learning what was going well for those programs and what we could take. Really, it became clear that there's no one size fits all. But what's nice about that is that we can take from their experience and take who's doing what well and use that for ourselves. So that was fantastic. There's 2 papers that you can see on this screen, and we'll share these with you on the website for anybody else who likes to see that evidence base. So they're from the Royal Pharmaceutical Society in the UK, and they're doing fantastic work in this space. So we'll share those with you definitely. But again, being a typical pharmacist, I said, is there more? Is there an SOP on this? Is there a framework? Is there a structure we can use? So Rachel, if we could go to the next slide. So I was really lucky to learn from the thought leaders in this field. So Professor David Clutterbuck and Dr. Julia Haddock-Miller. So they ran a program for mentoring program managers. So they ran some really specific training on this. And you know that feeling when you get the right training at the right time in the right place from the right people and everything just comes together. That was one of those moments. So the guidance and the training from them and being able to link in with them and ask questions and seek guidance on the development of a program was just fantastic. So the framework you can see here in the image, this was a real light bulb moment for me. So when they shared this validated, accredited framework that highlights the key stages of success factors for a mentoring program. So what this structure provides is support. So like you were talking, Anne-Marie, you don't know where to go. You don't want to ask someone because can you do that? How will they feel? So what this framework provides is support. So it supports mentors and mentees to find each other, to be matched and be trained, and to receive that ongoing support and CPD as they go through their relationship, which is so important that both mentors and mentees feel that support. And it also gives support and structure to the program as a whole. So that evaluation piece at the end, where you learn and you feed forward all of those learnings to ensure that your program is constantly getting better and is doing what you need it to do. Perfect. Another, I suppose, key learning from that was having a purpose to a mentoring program. So having a clear purpose for a formal mentoring program really sets it up for success. So that was another question that we had to come to. But really what this training did was it made the idea of a formal mentoring program for the pharmacy profession seem possible. This is something that could be achieved. So it was a real game changer. And all of a sudden, this overwhelming concept of starting a mentoring program or a mentoring culture for an entire profession that works in a range of different areas and are totally disparate, it seemed achievable. And we learned from the other people on the course as well, and they shared their experiences. So they were further along in their program development, and they really said that start with a pilot, see what works, and build that forward. So start small. And I think that really ties in with that growth mindset you were talking about, Rachel. So see what works and carry that forward. So I think that's an awful lot of information. So I just want to pause for a minute and say what we've covered. So we've talked about an awful lot. We've talked about the benefits of mentoring for the mentee, the mentor, and the profession as a whole. We've talked about the skills and how it works. We've looked at how mentoring is already happening in the profession, where those bright spots are, what barriers might exist to more happening, and what opportunities there might be in this space. We've talked about what others are doing and what we've learned from the best. So what happens next? And for me, this is the really exciting piece. And I'm so delighted to share with you all tonight that we're launching a pilot mentoring program for the pharmacy profession. So what do we hope to achieve with this? So the main purpose of this pilot is to empower newly registered pharmacists to take early control of their professional development and to realise the benefits of reflective practice. That fits in really nicely with the role of the Institute to engage the profession in ongoing CPD. So what is it going to look like? What will this look like? So as I mentioned, we're advised to start small, so that's what we're going to do. And pilots have worked for us in so many processes before, so we can build or co-create this together as a profession. So our pilot is going to be small. We're going to look for about 15 mentee and mentor pairs, and it's going to take place over a 3-month period. And who is it for then? So the mentees, we're looking at pharmacists in their early years, so that's 0 to 3 years, and that they'll get that additional support in their early career that we've talked about. That's so important with all those key transition points, and hopefully get an appreciation of the power of reflection and how that they can use that to their best to plan their own careers and have their own continuing professional development. For the mentors then, we're really going out to pharmacists who have completed the mentorship skills training workshops, and that they'll have an opportunity to put those skills to practice. So they have that huge fountain of knowledge, and that they'll have this structured program to use those skills. So when is it happening? Applications are opening next week. I'm really excited about this. I think there's going to be real value for the mentors and the mentees. But even more than that, I think this program hopefully is going to create energy and enthusiasm around mentoring. I think it's going to be of high quality, and it's something that we can learn from, and it also slots in with our operational strategy. Really what we hope is that this program creates networks, connects colleagues, because we hear that that's what we need in the profession, and that's what you were telling us at the start with our mentee meter. And hopefully be that start of creating a real culture of mentoring within the profession. So really our big ambition is to build on this, learn from the pilot, take that next step and support pharmacists and enable pharmacists through the creation of a mentoring network program. So starting with this pilot, starting small, learning what works and building it together. So I'm delighted to share that with you tonight, and I'd love to see your thoughts in the chat box, see what everybody is thinking with that. But the next slide, please, Rachel. I'm also conscious we're a little bit after 9, but this just gives a very brief overview. I know it looks complicated, of what you can expect or what's involved for those in the pilot program. What will it look like? What can you expect? We'll be in touch early next week with details on how to apply and what will be involved. There'll be a carefully considered matching process. There will be additional training for mentors and for mentees also, and with kickoff then at the end of March for a 3-month period, but there will definitely be support provided throughout. So that's really everything about our pilot program. Really interested to see your thoughts and questions. I can see there's comments coming through, so looking forward to getting to those. And I suppose going back to the first thing I said is that building this mentoring mindset together, we really want you all involved in this. So we actually have a call to action right now for you. Our pilot is focusing on those early career pharmacists. So what we're really looking, if we can head back onto our mentee.com, what we're asking you to all think about is what advice would you give your younger pharmacist self? And Rachel, I'll hand over to you to manage this mentee piece.
Thank you. And you know, I just had a penny drop moment where I thought of mentee and mentoring, Sarah. How had I not thought of that sooner?
I think that's what trips me up, Rachel.
I really don't know. But you know, I mean, it's all about the nuggets of information. And we just thought when we had so many of you on the call today, we'd love to get a sense. Now, someone has started off, do any other course. Well, you know, that space can come in and a perspective is always welcome. But what can we do for people? Don't be so impatient career-wise. Believe in yourself. You know, try new things, be brave. Everything isn't black and white. Thank you so much for that. You know, if you can just take a minute and share with us some advice. Some people are saying, look, we may not have made the right choice, you know, and there's always time, of course, for mentoring to help you with that and think about, well, what's the right source for you and what's the right steps for you. Don't limit yourself. Don't take things too seriously, and be confident. Get lots of sleep and follow your passion. So listen, already I'm loving reading through these, and thank you so much for taking the time to share that with us. You know, enjoy it, be more confident, and have integrity. So, you know, please, if you haven't done this already, I can see we have 43 responses. I know we're heading a little bit over time. If you can just take a minute and, you know, share with us some of these, the advice you'd give your younger self. We would love to have that, and share some of them hopefully in some of the materials for the pilot program. So thank you for taking the time to do that. And I guess, you know, whilst you're doing that, I think it's really kind of, we're moving into the kind of closing area of the call tonight. And so I want to thank everybody for their engagement on the call and their energy. We've as Sarah said, we've covered quite a lot. I mean, mentoring really is about supporting ourselves, but of course it's also about supporting and developing the whole profession. And you know, there's something Sarah said to me earlier. This is really about people helping people. So you know, we know that it's happening already, but it's really around developing this mindset so that we come into it learning focused, and we also then have the skills and the structure and the support to unleash that power and really tap into the potential and the power within the profession as is. So thank you again for sharing all of these advice to younger selves. We would like to, I guess, kind of talk about the ways you can get involved. So of course, if you don't meet the eligibility criteria for the pilot, we have a mentoring portal that will go live at the end of this week, where you can get access to some key resources, some more information about mentoring, and look out for the newsletter. I think we're going to have an article in that comes out this week. And also if you look at the social media as well, we'll be sharing developments and opportunities to hear more from you. There will be a dedicated mentoring mailbox, mentoring@iiop.ie. So at any time, if you want to kind of ask questions or kind of share suggestions, you can reach out to us on that directly, and either myself or Sarah will get back to you. So I hope you feel there's plenty of ways to get involved with the mentoring program as it evolves over the coming months. And I guess the last slide I have is again another ask from you. What's been your main insight from tonight? You know, what have you found most valuable, or maybe what's the biggest insight that has developed for you? If you could share some of your thoughts, we'd definitely love to hear that. There will be an evaluation survey, I think, that will come out after the call to each of you. But you know, we really have enjoyed, I suppose, having the conversation with you tonight, and we're really looking forward to continuing that over the coming weeks and months. Sarah, I know you told me the next IIOP webinar is going to be around health literacy, and it's going to be presented by the National Adult Literacy Agency. So that's going to be, I think the date for that still has to be decided, but more information will come on that. So I'm seeing a lot of lovely messages coming in. There's hope, we can still learn. I'd like a mentor. People empower people, and people will respect your influence. A lot of comments here around this is going to happen. There's possibilities, the energy in the profession, and that it's possible to, okay. And there's also some comments there around substance. So we'll definitely take a look at that. And if you want to share further, if you have any more points you want to make, we'd love to hear them. So again, this format is good for feeling connected to other pharmacists. And there's a lot of people who would be really strong on this in the profession. So lots of possibility, of course, coming through on the Mentimeter tonight. And thank you for sharing your perspectives. And we definitely want to hear more from you. So Sarah, that brings us to the end of tonight's webinar. I know we've gone a little bit over time. I think we're happy to stay on if people have any questions. And if they're, we can stay on for a few minutes after the call. But I'll formally close it out, I guess, for now. Thank you very much again for your participation tonight.
And I think it needs to be a huge thanks to Rachel and to Sarah. Sarah's done enormous work in this space and on bringing this pilot to this point. And, I think it's a great thing for pharmacy. I think, we need to look to each other to help our profession. And let's hope this is a start of something great.
Thanks so
much,
Anne-Marie. Thank you so much for your enthusiasm and your time and getting involved with this evening. And thanks, Rachel, for a fantastic presentation. It's great to have the engagement, and there's so much for us to go through all these comments. So I'm looking forward to being able to deep dive into these and really pick out what we can work on here.
Hi guys, I'd love to have a chat with somebody for a second, if that was okay.